we are now connected. And Aquarius, something about this energy feels different. I keep getting the feeling that someone is reaching a point where they can no longer ignore what they feel for you. This isn't giving me the energy of a small conversation. This feels bigger than that. It feels like someone is beginning to realize that what they want isn't just a moment with you, it's a future. The more I sit with this energy, the more it feels like a truth that has been building quietly for a very long time. So let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, Aquarius, the first thing that catches my attention is how unusual you appear in this person's eyes. And I don't mean unusual in a negative way. I mean the kind of different that makes somebody stop what they're doing and pay attention. You may not even realize how much your presence stands out. There is something about the way you think, the way you express yourself, the way you move through the world that feels impossible for this person to compare to anyone else. I keep seeing someone trying to understand you, not because they are confused by you, because they are fascinated by you. The Page of Swords keeps showing up around this energy, and it's almost like this person has spent more time observing you than they would ever admit. You know how sometimes someone enters your life and immediately makes sense? This doesn't feel like that. This feels like somebody entering your life and making you question everything you thought made sense before. That's the feeling I'm getting here. This person keeps replaying conversations. They keep replaying things you've said, little comments, little observations. The way you see situations from an angle they never considered. The way you challenge ideas without trying to start a fight. The way you seem comfortable being yourself, even when other people don't fully understand you. And I have to say, I don't think this person expected any of this. I think they thought they had life figured out. I think they thought they knew exactly what kind of person they would end up with. Then somehow Aquarius walked into the picture, and now they're questioning everything. The star is sitting right in the middle of this energy, and what stands out to me is the way this person looks at you. It's almost like they see possibility when they look at you. Not perfection, not fantasy, possibility, a different future, a different way of living, a different version of themselves. You inspire something inside them that they haven't felt in a very long time, maybe ever, and that's what keeps pulling them back. Even when they're busy, even when they're trying to focus on work, even when they're telling themselves they need to move on and think about something else, your energy somehow finds its way back into their mind. I keep getting that this person is deeply attracted to your intelligence, but it goes beyond intelligence. It's your perspective. The way you connect ideas, the way you notice things other people overlook, the way you can see beyond appearances. For some of you, this person may have initially been attracted to you physically, but the more they got to know you, the more dangerous it became for their heart. Because now they're not just interested, now they're invested. And that's a very different thing. What's interesting is that this person may not fully understand why they're feeling this way. They're trying to make sense of it, trying to organize it, trying to put it into a category that feels safe. But every time they do, something about you escapes the box they've created. And I think that's part of the attraction. You surprise them. You challenge them. You make them curious. The Six of Cups keeps floating through this energy, and there's something incredibly familiar about the connection from their perspective. It's not necessarily that they've known you forever. It's more like being around you creates a feeling they've been searching for without realizing it. A feeling of comfort, a feeling of recognition, a feeling that somehow life becomes quieter when you're near. I don't know why that's coming through so strongly, but it feels important. This person may have spent years meeting people who looked right on paper, people who checked every box, people who made sense. Yet something was always missing. Then you show up, and suddenly things don't just make sense, they feel alive. I keep hearing this person asking themselves questions they never thought they would ask. Questions about commitment, questions about the future, questions about what they really want. And honestly, that surprises them. Because this doesn't feel like somebody who expected to be standing here. This feels like somebody who accidentally wandered into feelings that became much deeper than they planned. The more they learn about you, the more they want to know. The more they understand, the more they realize how much remains undiscovered. And there's something beautiful about that. Because instead of pushing them away, it keeps drawing them closer. Closer to your mind. Closer to your heart. Closer to the possibility of something they haven't quite found the courage to put into words yet. Because what I'm seeing here isn't someone who has all the answers. It's someone who is slowly realizing that Aquarius may be becoming far more important to them than they ever intended. Because the truth is, Aquarius, this person wasn't looking for their life to change. That's what keeps coming through. I don't get the feeling that they were searching for some great love story or waiting for somebody to come along and turn their world upside down. If anything, I feel like they were trying to keep everything exactly the way it was. Predictable, manageable, safe. And that's where things started becoming complicated. Because the deeper their feelings grew, the harder it became to pretend they weren't growing at all. Okay, I keep seeing someone having conversations with themselves that nobody else knows about, trying to talk themselves out of what they feel, trying to convince themselves that they're imagining things, that they're reading too much into the connection, that maybe they're just caught up in a moment. But every time they reach that conclusion, something happens. Maybe they hear your name. Maybe they remember a conversation. Maybe they see something that reminds them of you. And suddenly, all those carefully constructed arguments start falling apart again. The moon keeps hovering around this energy, and there's something very private about what this person is experiencing, because they aren't showing the world what's happening inside of them. Most people around them would probably assume everything is fine, that they're in control, that they know exactly where they're going. But underneath that surface, there is a lot more uncertainty than anyone realizes. I think what scares them isn't the connection itself. It's what the connection is asking them to confront. You know, it's easy to stay detached when nothing matters deeply. It's easy to protect your freedom when nobody has the ability to touch your heart. But once somebody starts becoming important, everything changes. The rules change. The priorities change. The future starts looking different. And I don't think this person was prepared for that. I keep getting that they value independence very strongly. They've built a life around being self-sufficient, making their own decisions, moving at their own pace, answering to nobody. There's a certain comfort in that, a certain sense of control. And yet, the closer they feel to you emotionally, the more they find themselves imagining things they never used to imagine. Not because they're trying to, because it happens naturally, without permission, without planning, without warning. And honestly, that loss of control makes them nervous. The Eight of Swords keeps appearing here, not as something external, more like a conversation happening entirely inside their own head. I keep hearing them ask themselves questions. What if this goes too far? What if I get hurt? What if I can't give them what they deserve? What if I change my entire life for this and it doesn't work? What if they don't feel the same way? What if I'm already too late? It's like their mind keeps creating one doorway after another, only to immediately place a lock on each one. The feeling is very much stop, go, move closer, pull away, reach out, stay silent. And the exhausting part is that they know they're doing it. They're aware of the pattern. They just don't know how to break it yet. What's interesting is that this person may appear very confident from the outside. People might look at them and assume they have everything figured out. But confidence and vulnerability are two completely different things. And vulnerability is exactly where this person struggles. Because being vulnerable means being seen. It means allowing another person to matter. It means risking disappointment, risking rejection, risking change. I have to say, change feels like one of the biggest themes around this energy. Not because this person hates change, because they know that once certain truths are spoken, life can't go back to what it was before. That's what they're standing in front of right now. A doorway, a threshold, a moment where they know something is shifting, and they're trying to decide whether they're brave enough to walk through it. The Two of Swords keeps bringing me back to that image. Someone sitting between two realities. One path feels familiar, the other feels meaningful. One path protects them, the other path asks them to trust. And I think they've been sitting there longer than they want to admit, because every time they start leaning toward you, the fears get louder. Every old wound starts speaking. Every past disappointment starts reminding them of what happened before. For some of them, this isn't even about you. It's about experiences they carried long before you arrived. People who broke promises, people who walked away, people who taught them that loving deeply comes with consequences. So when they feel themselves falling for you, those old memories wake up too. And suddenly they're not just dealing with the present. They're dealing with years of unresolved fears all at once. The strange thing is, no matter how many reasons they come up with to slow down, no matter how many times they try to create distance, something keeps pulling their attention back toward you. I keep getting this image of someone staring at a message they haven't sent, thinking about a conversation they haven't had, replaying words they haven't spoken, as though part of them already knows exactly what they want to say. They just haven't figured out how to say it without exposing every feeling we've been trying so hard to keep hidden. And the more they hold it in, the heavier it becomes. Almost like their heart is beginning to carry a truth their mind can no longer organize, explain, or control. Because at some point, Aquarius, avoiding a feeling becomes more painful than facing it. And that's where this person's energy begins to shift. I keep getting the sense that something happened during a period of distance. Not necessarily a dramatic event, not necessarily a big argument. Sometimes it's much quieter than that. Sometimes it's simply waking up one morning and realizing that somebody's absence has become impossible to ignore. You know, people often think they understand the value of something while it's still there. But what I'm seeing here feels different. This feels like somebody who thought they had more time to figure things out, more time to decide what they wanted, more time to sort through their emotions, more time to say what they needed to say. And somewhere along the way, they started noticing the silence. Not your words, not your actions, the space, the lack of your energy, the lack of your presence, the lack of knowing what was happening in your world. And I have to say, that realization hit harder than they expected. The Five of Pentacles keeps appearing around this energy. And what stands out to me is not loneliness. It's contrast. Because this person is starting to compare what life feels like with you in it versus life without you close by. And they're noticing things they never noticed before. The excitement isn't the same. Certain conversations don't feel as meaningful. Certain achievements don't feel as satisfying. Even moments that should feel good somehow carry an emptiness they can't quite explain. It's almost like a piece of their emotional world has been missing. And they are only now realizing how important that piece actually was. I keep seeing somebody trying to distract themselves, throwing themselves into work, into responsibilities, into routines, into anything that keeps them moving. But every distraction eventually runs out. Every busy day eventually ends. And when everything becomes quiet again, your energy finds its way back into their thoughts. Not because they're trying to think about you, because they can't stop thinking about what you mean to them. Okay, this is interesting, because the energy shifts from confusion into awareness. The Judgment card starts coming forward, and what I keep hearing is, I can't keep pretending anymore. Not necessarily to you, to themselves. Because I think there was a time when this person convinced themselves that what they felt wasn't important, that it would pass, that it wasn't worth risking their comfort zone, that it wasn't worth disrupting their carefully planned life. But the longer they've sat with these feelings, the harder it has become to deny what's real. And what's real isn't always convenient. Sometimes what's real asks you to change. Sometimes what's real asks you to leave behind versions of yourself that no longer fit. And I think that's exactly what this person is facing. They're starting to recognize how much fear has been driving their decisions. Not wisdom, not intuition. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of being seen. And for the first time, they're questioning whether those fears deserve as much power as they've been given. The more I sit with this energy, the more I feel like this person is looking at their life from a completely different perspective. They're reevaluating friendships, reevaluating priorities, reevaluating habits, even reevaluating the people whose opinions they've relied on for years. Because I keep getting the feeling that some of those voices have been influencing them more than they realized. Maybe friends, maybe family, maybe people who meant well, maybe people who didn't. But there is definitely an energy here of someone beginning to ask, what do I actually want? Not what everyone else expects, not what everyone else approves of. What do I want? And that question changes everything. Because once that question appears, the old answers stop working. The Death card keeps moving through this reading in such a powerful way. And what I'm feeling isn't an ending between two people. It's an ending within one person. An ending of old patterns. An ending of old excuses. An ending of old ways of thinking that kept them trapped in the same cycle. I keep getting this image of somebody standing in front of a mirror and realizing they don't want to be the same version of themselves anymore. Not because they hate who they are, because they've outgrown who they used to be. And Aquarius, whether you realize it or not, you've played a role in that transformation, not by forcing it, not by fixing them, simply by being yourself. Your authenticity challenged something inside them. Your honesty challenged something inside them. The way you live your life challenged something inside them. And once they saw that possibility, it became very difficult to go back to who they were before. I keep getting that they miss more than your presence. They miss how they felt around you. They miss feeling understood. They miss feeling inspired. They miss feeling curious about the future. And maybe that's what surprises them most, because they thought distance would weaken the connection. Instead, distance gave them a clearer view of it. The farther away they became from the situation, the easier it became to see what had actually been standing in front of them all along. And for the first time, it feels like this person is becoming less interested in protecting themselves and more interested in finding out whether it's still possible to close the distance they created. A sentence keeps coming through that this person has probably rehearsed 100 different ways in their mind. Not because they don't know what they feel, because they care about how it lands. Because once certain words leave their mouth, they can't take them back. And for somebody who has spent so much time filtering their emotions, measuring their reactions, and keeping the deeper parts of themselves hidden, that feels like standing on the edge of something enormous. I keep seeing somebody reaching for their phone and putting it back down, opening a conversation and closing it, typing a message, deleting it, starting over. Not because they don't want to talk, because they want to say the right thing. And the more important the conversation becomes, the harder it becomes to begin. There is something incredibly vulnerable about this energy. The Ace of Cups is sitting here, and what I notice first isn't excitement, it's sincerity. A level of sincerity that feels almost uncomfortable for this person, because they're used to showing competence. They're used to showing strength. They're used to showing the version of themselves that seems unaffected by everything. What they aren't used to showing is how deeply they care. And that's exactly what they're wrestling with. Some people are afraid of rejection. This feels slightly different. This feels like somebody being afraid of being fully known. Because once they tell you the truth, Aquarius, you'll understand just how much space you've been occupying inside their heart. You'll understand how often you've crossed their mind, how often they've wondered what you're doing, how often they've imagined conversations that never happened, how often they've wished circumstances had been different. And I don't think they're used to giving that kind of power to another person. That's why this moment feels so significant. Because they're beginning to realize that silence is no longer protecting them. It's only creating more distance. The energy I'm getting here feels very personal, almost intimate. Like someone sitting alone late in the evening replaying memories nobody else knows about. Not dramatic memories, not movie scenes, small moments. The kind of moments that unexpectedly become important later. The way you laughed, something you said, the way you looked at them when nobody else was paying attention. A conversation that lasted 5 minutes, but somehow stayed with them for months. It's those moments that keep returning. And I think that's what finally changed something inside this person. The realization that they aren't holding on to an idea. They're holding on to you. Okay. This is interesting because the High Priestess keeps appearing around this connection. And what I'm getting isn't secrecy. It's unspoken understanding. It's the feeling that there are things between the two of you that never needed to be explained. Things that were felt before they were spoken. Things that existed underneath the surface. I think this person sensed that even when they were trying not to. Even when logic told them to ignore it. There was always something underneath everything else, something they couldn't fully name. And now they're finding themselves wanting clarity, not because they suddenly have all the answers, because they're tired of pretending they don't have questions. The more I sit with this energy, the more I feel somebody becoming honest with themselves about what they truly want. And surprisingly, it doesn't look like the life they imagined before. The priorities are changing. The things they once chased don't seem as important. Certain goals still matter. Success still matters. Freedom still matters. But they're starting to realize that sharing life with the right person might matter too. And that's where Aquarius keeps appearing. Not as an interruption, not as a distraction, but as part of the picture. Part of the future they keep accidentally imagining. I keep hearing this person say, I wish I had said something sooner. Not necessarily because they believe it's too late. Because they know how much time was spent avoiding the conversation. Time spent waiting for certainty, waiting for perfect timing, waiting for some magical moment when everything would suddenly feel easy. But life doesn't really work that way. Feelings don't really work that way. Sometimes all that waiting creates is more waiting. And I think they're beginning to understand that. The Eight of Wands brings movement into this energy. Not rushed movement, not reckless movement, just movement. The kind that happens when somebody finally becomes tired of standing still. I keep getting this image of momentum building. A thought becoming a decision becoming an action becoming a conversation. The pieces aren't fully in place yet, but something is definitely changing. The hesitation feels weaker than it used to. The fear feels less convincing than it used to. And for the first time in a long time, this person seems more interested in expressing their feelings than hiding them. Because what keeps coming through is surprisingly simple. Beneath all the overthinking, beneath all the caution, beneath all the delays, there is somebody who wants Aquarius to know just how important they have become. And the closer they get to speaking that truth out loud, the harder it becomes to keep carrying it alone. What keeps surprising me about this energy is how practical it becomes. Because for the longest time, this person could hide behind emotions. They could hide behind uncertainty. They could hide behind questions they hadn't answered yet. But what I'm looking at now feels different. The feelings are no longer staying in the realm of imagination. They're starting to move into real life, into everyday life, into the future, into the things that actually matter. You know, there comes a point when attraction isn't the question anymore. The question becomes, can I picture this person standing beside me years from now? And Aquarius, that's exactly where this person's mind keeps wandering. Not to grand romantic gestures, not to fantasy, to ordinary moments. Strangely enough, those are the moments they keep thinking about. Sharing a meal, coming home after a long day, talking about things that happened at work, laughing about something completely ridiculous, building routines together, building memories together, building a life together. And I think that's what caught them off guard, because these thoughts arrived quietly. Nobody announced them. Nobody forced them. One day, they simply realized that whenever they pictured the future, you were there. The lovers keeps appearing in such a natural way here. And what I notice isn't passion, it's choice. Because this person is beginning to understand that love isn't only something you feel. It's something you choose again and again, through easy days, through difficult days, through growth, through change, through uncertainty. And for somebody who spent so much time trying to understand their feelings, they're now beginning to ask a different question. Not what do I feel, but what am I willing to build? Okay, that's a very different conversation because building requires commitment. Building requires consistency. Building requires showing up. And I think that's why the Hierophant feels so important around this energy. Not because this person suddenly became someone different overnight, but because they're beginning to take their feelings seriously. Seriously enough to imagine responsibility. Seriously enough to imagine partnership. Seriously enough to imagine creating something that lasts. I keep getting this image of somebody sitting quietly and realizing that the things they once feared don't seem as frightening anymore. It's almost like their priorities have shifted. The freedom they fought so hard to protect now looks different, because they're starting to understand that sharing life with the right person doesn't necessarily take freedom away. Sometimes it creates a different kind of freedom. The freedom to be understood. The freedom to stop carrying everything alone. The freedom to stop pretending you don't care. And honestly, I think that realization changes a lot for this person, because for so long, they've been trying to handle everything themselves. Handle their emotions themselves. Handle their problems themselves. Handle their future themselves. But when they think about Aquarius, I don't see somebody wanting to carry life alone anymore. I see somebody imagining what life could look like when it's shared. The Ten of Pentacles keeps drawing my attention, and what stands out is the sense of permanence surrounding it. This person isn't thinking about next week. They're not thinking about next month. Their mind keeps stretching much further than that. They're thinking about stability, security, family, legacy. The things that remain long after excitement settles into something deeper, and that's what feels so significant. Because what they're feeling isn't becoming smaller with time. It's becoming more grounded, more real, more connected to the life they actually want to live. I keep hearing this person say, I want something real, not perfect, real. A connection that survives difficult conversations. A connection that survives misunderstandings. A connection that survives growth, because growth is important here. The more I sit with this energy, the more I realize that Aquarius inspires growth inside this person. Not through pressure, not through expectations, simply through your existence. The way you think challenges them. The way you approach life challenges them. The way you remain authentic challenges them. And instead of pushing them away, that challenge has become part of the reason they can't stop moving toward you emotionally. The sun begins to warm this entire energy in a beautiful way. And I have to say, there is a softness here that wasn't present before. Less fear, less resistance, less internal conflict. Not because every question has been answered, because something deeper has become clear. This person knows how they feel, and perhaps even more importantly, they're beginning to understand what they want, not what others want for them, not what the world expects from them, what they want. And every road seems to keep leading back to the same place, back to the same face, back to the same voice, back to the same connection that somehow changed the direction of their heart without asking permission first. The feeling I'm getting isn't that they're standing at the end of a journey. It's that they're standing at the beginning of a very honest chapter. One where hiding becomes harder. One where truth becomes necessary. One where the future no longer feels like a distant concept, because for the first time, they're starting to imagine what that future might look like with Aquarius standing right beside them. Aquarius, I can't help but feel that this story isn't really about an ending. It feels more like a moment of realization, a moment where somebody can no longer ignore what their heart has been trying to tell them. Whatever happens from here, I hope you remember that your presence has more impact than you realize. The way you think, the way you love, the way you move through the world leaves a lasting impression on the people who cross your path. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for allowing me to connect with your energy today. I appreciate every single one of you more than you know. Take care of yourselves. Keep your heart open, keep moving forward, and trust that clarity has a way of arriving exactly when it's needed. Okay. Until our next reading, sending you so much love. Bye, Aquarius.